Each Assassin's Creed game has a variety of missions. Some are insanely simple, others not so much. And in today's video, we are looking at some of the hardest missions that you can play within each Assassin's Creed. Going all the way back to the beginning, Assassin's Creed. One of the hardest missions during this time was to kill Sibrand of Acre. On paper, this seems quite simple. Sibrand is situated on a boat, as opposed to the other targets where it's normally in castle keeps or inside military camps. And as you would expect, Altair is gifted with a variety of abilities, but unfortunately, swimming is not one of them. Luckily nowadays, if you wanted to go through this mission, there are loads of tutorials showing you the perfect route, but as a kid, none of this was available, and I would never think to actually use YouTube as a platform to actually see if someone else has completed this, to show a tutorial on step by step in the way to go through. Because of that, it led to this mission being a struggle. Assassin's Creed 2. We have selected Port Authority. This mission is fairly similar to what we just talked about with Altair, except Ezio has the ability to swim. The mission involves you assassinating a target on a boat. And with this one, because you can just swim over to it, it means that you don't need to rely so much on parkour as well as being stealthy. But even with this, the ship is full of guards, making it virtually impossible to clear out, particularly due to the high amount of dialogue that some of these guards have. And it's not based on a set routine with one guard moving, another one will move. It's when the dialogue finishes, and this makes it somewhat random. Now, if you did just want to complete this mission, it's fairly easy. Just go into the boat, assassinate target, and you can just jump in the water and swim away. But for you to get 100% synchronization, you need to do this without being detected. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. This is the mission called In and Out, and on the surface, all you need to do is kill the banker, but unfortunately, you need to take a very specific route to do this. You'll need to weave in and out of different crowds so that you can actually camouflage and blend in with them, and finally you'll get to the point where you can see the main area for the party. But unfortunately, that's where things really get tricky, because for you to get 100% synchronization, you must assassinate the banker from a bench without being detected. Very difficult to do when you've got hundreds of people around you. And if you mess up here, it means restarting that whole mission again and going back to the beginning where you need to go through those different alleyways and paths for you to blend with people in order for you to get to that point where you can actually complete this mission. Assassin's Creed Revelations. The mission that most people struggled with is called The Champion Part 2. Yet again, on the surface, this one is fairly easy because all you need to do is defend a civilian. There will be several waves of enemies that will attack you, and what you need to make sure is that you're able to kill them before they can kill the civilian. But yet again, it's the 100% synchronization which most people struggled with, because you needed to make sure that they didn't lose a single bar of health, not just one hit. You need to make sure that you was able to keep them alive with not even a scratch on them. The thing that people struggled with is this was also the year in which Ubisoft really tried to put more emphasis on the assassination animations. They ended up being a lot longer as Ezio would do some different types of moves using the various different tools and equipment that he has acquired in his old age, making it a lot harder. As more waves will be coming through, you're able to easily take care of them, but you'll realize that your assassination animation takes a lot longer than what it should, and there you go, in the distance, your target has just taken damage. Assassin's Creed 3. Assassin's Creed 3 was where things really started to get challenging in terms of the different types of objectives that you needed to complete in terms of 100% synchronization. We've even gone through a couple whilst talking about the worst missions in Assassin's Creed, but to stop this being just a repeat of that, we're selecting a different one, and we're selecting the Giant and the Storm. There is only one objective for the whole mission. This is to ignite the powder kegs of 3 ships in order to sink them. Now, given the poor accuracy of the aimed cannons on Connor's ships, actually hitting these powder kegs is somewhat tricky. However, it gets worse because these powder kegs have a chance of igniting spontaneously. The way in which you're able to hit these powder kegs in the first place is because you've already dealt damage to that ship itself. You're able to see them below deck. But because you've already hit them, in some cases they will just ignite. and that in itself does not count for the objective, so you would need to get extremely lucky with this. And as this is the final challenge of the mission, it means that this is the last thing that you're doing. If you manage to get all the way through this and get to this final point where just one of those spontaneously combust, it means that you'll need to restart the whole mission and go again. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. The mission that we've selected is the Siege of Charlestown. This is arguably one of the most hated missions, not within the game, but within the series. It's known that Ubisoft love doing tailored missions, and in Black Flag, they took it a bit too far. Because in this mission, you must follow your target on the jackdaw whilst being in a swamp, and there also being different areas where it's actually secure. There's guards, so that you need to actually take them down, remove the chain, and then be able to proceed. This just did not work well, and because of it, it became one of the hardest missions to do, whilst also being the worst mission to do. Assassin's Creed Rogue. This one is Storm Fortress. This is known as one of the hardest missions and also one of the worst missions within Rogue. Reason for this is because the Storm Fortress is a legendary ship. Like most legendary ships that you see in AC Rogue as well as Black Flag, it has a very high amount of health, with it also being able to deal a ridiculous amount of damage. But this one takes it to a whole new level. This is one of the legendary ships which will not only use the guns available on board, but will also ram you. And the second that you start to think that maybe you're able to actually beat this mission, the second that you get it down to half health, it will actually call upon 2 other man of wars, which is going to be another thing that you need to worry about whilst you're under attack from all possible angles. Completing this really is a challenge. Assassin's Creed Unity. With this one, we're not looking at the main story missions because there's one that just towers over everything. This is one of the co-op missions known as Tournament. Ubisoft believed that co-op gameplay was the future of Assassin's Creed. And even though it did offer some good missions right at the beginning, it also offered many problems, making it very tricky for you to link up with other players. The tournament is a parkour mission where you will need to take a specific route in order for you to collect as many flags as possible. But it is intended to be with 4 players. Unfortunately, because of those problems that we just mentioned on the release, it was very difficult to link up with other players, so most had to do this by themselves, which makes it one of the hardest missions to do. And by the time that Ubisoft actually fixed some of these problems, it was too late. The player count started to drop. That there just wasn't that many people looking for Assassin's Creed co-op gameplay when they were already moving on to other games that were releasing at the time. And if you try and do this now, chances are, yet again, it's the same issue. You're not going to be able to find other players unless you're already in a group of friends that are just dying to play Unity, which there probably isn't any. Assassin's Creed Syndicate. For this one, we have selected the mission A Thorn in the Side. This is where you need to assassinate Lucy Thorn, but it being mixed with the target, the location, and it being heavily guarded is the reason why it's on this list. Because the location is the Tower of London, and because it is the Tower of London, of course there's going to be many guards. You're thrown into the Tower of London area, and you need to figure out the best path to assassinate your target. And there are multiple different ways to go about this, but that doesn't make it easier. For you to go through this without being detected is a true masterpiece. You need to spend the majority of your time going through Syndicate and just studying this mission, figuring out the different paths to take, the different optional objectives that you complete, the best way to go around without being detected, and of course doing all of this whilst still assassinating the target, completing this to get 100% synchronization. Very, very difficult. Assassin's Creed Origins. This is when Ubisoft took a different approach with the Assassin's Creed series and made it more of an RPG style. This brought in various different boss fights, which does mean, of course, the hardest mission is going to be one of these boss fights, and we've selected Lucius Septimus. Now this mission has some fantastic design as well as gameplay. It can be incredibly fun, but it was also designed to be extremely challenging, and Ubisoft certainly pulled that off. What made it so difficult was the range of attacks and speed of them too. There's so many different styles you need to look out for that if you got too close, all of a sudden you could just be whipped up with his special abilities. But if you stayed at a distance, Lucius would adapt his fighting playstyle, and that will be just as deadly. There are some missions on this list where it becomes hard, that it becomes frustrating, and a mission itself is not fun. This is actually one of those where it is fun. Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Similar to Origins, boss fights were the most challenging part of the game. So for this one, we've selected the Amanthian Boar. And the reason that we're selecting this over some of the other boss fights in the game is for two reasons. First reason is that it is still very challenging. The boar's health is insanely high, and it has two main attacks where it will charge into you, plus also it leaves this poisonous gas behind wherever it goes, which does mean if you're in its path, you're taking damage, and if you avoid it, there's still very specific areas on the designated location where you're able to fight this boar that you can't go, because if you do go, you're also going to be affected by the poisonous gas. That brings some limitations. The second reason why this is the hardest mission is because you encounter this very early on in the game, and in most cases for most players, they're still trying to get used to the controls. Now, if you were to go back and replay this, you would probably know exactly what gear to look out for, what you're going to apply, and what weapons you're going to use. But going through this for the first time, you probably didn't, and this made it a lot harder than what it should be. And finally, we have Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and a mission that we've selected is called Storming the Walls. In this one, it becomes challenging because there are multiple tasks to go through at the exact same time. You're storming a castle, which is its very own challenge. There are lots of enemies, there are a lot of optional tasks, and it's already difficult enough to go through these without taking damage, especially when trying to take down the barricaded gates. But on top of that, it's its very own boss fight, which is Fulke. Fulke is a damage sponge, which means if you're going into this as a low level, it's already extremely difficult, let alone those other things that we've just mentioned. But there's also levels to fighting Fulke. It's not just one area boss fight, knock down the health as much as possible, be done. The second that you knock it down, she runs away, where you'll need to go through this all over again in a completely different setting. Try going through this at a lower level than what you should be, whilst going to fight Fulke in the dark where you need to go and use fire to see exactly where she is. Yeah, that becomes extremely difficult. But anyway guys, here are some of the hardest missions within Assassin's Creed. If you feel like we've missed one and there's a mission that you just could not stand because of its difficulty, then feel free to leave it in the comment section down below. But anyway guys, if you enjoyed this video, then I highly recommend clicking the next video on screen. That video goes through the best missions from each Assassin's Creed. It's no longer worrying about what's the most difficult, it's looking at those which are the most entertaining. So click that video and I'll be over there to walk you through each and every single one.